The development of SSRIs in the 1980s completely revolutionized the way doctors treat depression and other psychiatric disorders. They are so popular today and commonly prescribed that there's a very high chance that you yourself or somebody you know is taking one. So in this video, we're going to take a closer look into SSRIs, explaining their mechanism, benefits, and potential side effects. I often tell my students that when you come across a new term, particularly in the sciences, the first thing you should do is to take apart or dissect the term itself, which will often reveal its meaning. So take, for example, SSRIs, which stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitors. And I know this sounds like a big phrase, but if we take apart each term, we're going to get a nice foundation of what SSRIs actually do. So starting with the term selective. Now, drugs can affect many different chemical messages in the brain. But what makes SSRIs very special is that they are selective, right? They only target a very specific chemical message. And that chemical or neurotransmitter is called serotonin. And serotonin is vital to our well-being, right? It affects our happiness, our overall well-being, our mood, our appetite, and even our sleep. We also have a term, inhibitor. Inhibitor means to block or stop. So I might say in a sentence that my fear of heights is inhibiting me from flying in a plane. And then lastly, what we're going to really focus on in the video is the term reuptake. And when you hear the word reuptake, I want you to think of recycle, right? Reusing something for another day. All right, so already we have a nice foundation of what SSRIs actually do. They are very selective. They don't focus on all chemicals, but they target very specific chemicals, specifically serotonin, and they block or inhibit a process called reuptake. All right? All right, now before we go over why we take SSRIs and possible side effects, let's first understand the mechanism, right? How do SSRIs actually work in the brain? And we start by looking at these two cells up here. And these are two neurons. Now you have billions of neurons in the brain, okay? Now even though they're very packed together, they don't actually touch each other. Why is that important? It's because there's a tiny gap in between those two neurons in which the chemicals flow over and communicate to each other. Do we know what that gap is called? That gap is called the synaptic cleft or synaptic gap. And that's what we're seeing right here. We have our first neuron. I'll label that number 1. This is our first neuron. And we have our second neuron, number 2. Okay? And we have neuron number 1 passing its message over the synaptic cleft to neuron number 2. And just for fun, because I'm going to use these terms in our discussion, we're going to label the first neuron as the presynaptic neuron. Okay? Pre meaning before. So we have the presynaptic neuron. And do we know what the second one will be called? We're going to call this the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so when I talk about neurons, pre is the one that releases its content and chemical messages over the cleft into the postsynaptic neuron, which is going to collect or receive that chemical message. All right. Now, in order for neurons to fire, right, and to talk to each other, we need some sort of stimulation, right? So maybe I put my hand under cold water, or wind in my hair, or I have some sort of thought, right? That's going to produce an electrical charge that's going to travel down the neuron in order for it to release its content. Do you know what that charge is called that's going to travel down the neuron? It's called an action potential. Now, I have an entire video on action potential, I'll link up above, but we're just going to go over very basics, kind of what it is, and then how it's going to lead to a chemical exchange in the synaptic cleft. Now, if we have enough stimulation, right, as I said before, we're going to reach a specific threshold, okay? And if that threshold is reached, we're going to have very specific channels all along the membrane that are going to open and close. And the most important one when it comes to action potential is a sodium-gated channel. Okay? And if that threshold is reached, we have enough stimulation, we're going to have all this sodium enter our cell. And sodium is so positive, it's going to literally change the charge within the cell, which is actually what an action potential is. So right now we're at rest. We're at resting potential. The neuron is negatively charged. And because this is so positive, it's going to change the charge within the cell to positive. Okay? This is what an action potential is. It's the change from negative to positive, and that depolarization wave is going to travel down the neuron. Now, once that happens, it's going to signal another very important gate called the calcium gated channel to open up, and that's going to cause calcium to enter the cell. Okay? Calcium enters the cell. The calcium is going to link itself to these little bags here. Do we know what those are called? These are called vesicles. Okay? And these vesicles are really important. Why? Because they hold the chemical message that's going to be released. In this case, S stands for serotonin. Okay? And this is going to cause a really important chemical reaction. This is a big science term. You ready? Exocytosis. Okay? What does that mean? The calcium is going to make all these bags, all these vesicles, move down towards the end of the presynaptic neuron, right? The membrane of the end, right? They're going to move all down. And they're going to fuse together, right? Fuse together with the membrane of the presynaptic neuron. So we're going to have this open up. It's going to open up, and it's going to fuse together, right? How cool is that? Okay? This is exocytosis. And what's going to happen once they fuse together? All of the contents of these vesicles are going to be released into this gap. Let's remember, what is that gap called? The synaptic cleft. So all of the contents going to be released. Okay? All of it's going to be released. I'll just do it right there. And what happens with our serotonin? It's going to bind itself, there we go, to the receptor sites on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay? And if enough binding occurs, right, sodium is going to enter the receptor sites and action potential is going to fire again. This is the basic foundation of the chemical electrical change of two neurons. Okay, so where do SSRIs come in? Well, only a small percentage of serotonin is going to bind to the receptors. A lot of it is going to be broken down by enzymes. The other part of it, which is a majority of it, is going to be recycled back into the original neuron. Your cells are very efficient, so all the serotonin that doesn't bind or break down is going to go through these transporter portals and recycled back into the original neuron. How cool is that, right? Our cells are so efficient. Okay, so we're being recycled back into the original. Okay, but here's where SSRIs come in. Let's say you're taking Lexapro, right? And Lexapro is the generic name, right? That sounds a lot better than citalopram. That's why we have a generic name for it. We have our SSRIs. Maybe you're taking that for anxiety. What this is going to do, and this is very special, let's say you took it in the morning, is that what it's going to do, it's going to block this transporter portal. Okay, it's going to block this portal right here. Ooh, move that. Which makes the serotonin unable to go back up, unable to recycle. Okay? And this recycling phase, by the way, is called reuptake. Have we heard the word reuptake before? I think we have. This is how SSRIs work. They block the reuptake process and serotonin can't go back. So what does that do? What happens is that they all flood your synaptic cleft, right? There's nowhere for them to go. They can't be recycled. So they flood this area. Okay? What does that do? It makes serotonin more available. It makes increases the likelihood of binding to the receptor sites in the next neuron and increasing the likelihood that this next neuron is going to fire. So we have more serotonin. All right? So let's write that in together. How do SSRIs work? Number one, they inhibit, I'll write the word block, they inhibit or block the reuptake process. Okay, so neurons cannot be recycled. Why is that important? It increases the availability of serotonin, right? Of serotonin, specifically in the synaptic cleft. Serotonin. Okay, so that's how SSRIs work. We block the reuptake process. We have more serotonin, which makes this neuron more likely to fire. Okay, now a couple things to keep in mind. Even though SSRIs were discovered for depression, right? They're not just used for depression today. They're also used for anxiety disorders like panic attacks, phobias, and generalized anxiety. They're also prescribed for trauma disorders like PTSD, and even obsessive compulsive disorders, right? So they're used for a lot of different things, right? This kind of blocking of reuptake has proven to work for a lot of these disorders. Of course, there are potential side effects as well. Those include everything from drowsiness, emotional blunting, and that's, there's highs and lows of life, but emotional blunting is you don't really feel highs, but you don't feel lows as well, right? You're kind of in that middle zone, that blah feeling, Low libido, low sex drive. In men, it might be erectile dysfunction. Gastrointestinal issues, weight changes, and even sleep disturbances like insomnia. Now, it's really important to know by looking at this chart, you might come away with, wow, all you're saying is if we give somebody more serotonin, they're going to be happier, right? This is kind of the serotonin hypothesis. But this is a very oversimplified, kind of archaic view of how SSRIs work, or at least maybe what is the cause of depression, right? If you just give somebody serotonin, that's not necessarily going to make them happier. This idea of a chemical imbalance in the brain is a very antiquated view of depression, right? There's no idea of just a balanced sense of serotonin that's going to make you happier. So instead today, it's more thought of that depression is caused by not just serotonin, but other neurotransmitters, brain circuitry, genetics, your resilience or exposure to stressors, diet and exercise, and other environmental factors. So yes, even though this is kind of the serotonin hypothesis of a chemical imbalance, why they work is much more complex and of course is much debated.